Hello, my name is Vara Joy Javine, the Rainbow Conduit at Inbodied Ascended Presence. Today I'm going to read to you from a book called The Body of the Goddess, Sacred Wisdom in Myth, Landscape, and Culture by Rachel Pollack. Rachel Pollack was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1945. She holds an honors degree in English from New York University, a master's in English from Claremont Graduate School, and has taught English at New York State University. The author of several books, she is the winner of the Arthur C. Clarke Award for Science Fiction for Unquenchable Fire. This book was published on Element Books Limited in 1997. The dedication says, "The body of the goddess is dedicated to all those who traveled with me to the sacred places." And she lists several names. "And especially Maria Fernandez, who offered friendship, a haven, and a pomegranate seed, all at the right moment." Acknowledgements. Someone once defined an expert as a person who knows more and more about less and less. During the writing of this book, I have often felt that I knew less and less about more and more. I am trying to follow the theme of the goddess's body. I have drawn heavily on the work of so many people in so many fields of study and expression: historians, archaeologists, artists, priestesses, scientists, psychologists, diviners, novelists, theologians, classicists, and simply friends who have traveled and done their own research. If I have misrepresented people's ideas or discoveries, and I am sure I have, despite all best intentions, the fault is entirely my own, and I apologize. Where I have left off in my own direction from other people's research, I have tried to make this clear. If I have muddled anyone else's work with my own speculations, again, I apologize. This book does not attempt to be a book of history or scholarship, much less theology or theology. The religion of the goddess is not simply a subject of history, but is alive today in the vast research of people like Marija Gimbutas, and also in poetry and art, and in the rituals people do alone and in groups, in temples and caves, and also in their own backyards and kitchens. I have tried to honor all these levels of the resurgent goddess religion, and to express my gratitude for all the contributions those people have made, both the scholars and the worshippers, and especially those whose desire to know more has led them into rigorous research, as well as those who have found that scholarship has led them to belief and passionate commitment. 3 scholars deserve special mention. The first is Marija Gimbutas, the archaeologist who matched her vast research with the courage to step outside the official academic theology and recognize the reality of a wide-ranging, complex religion in all the art and excavated ruins of prehistoric Europe. Prehistoric, huh? The second writer, less known today, is Gertrude Rachel Levy. When I first began reading the modern goddess writers, I noticed one work mentioned again and again, Levy's The Gate of Horn. Writing half a century ago, Levy had the gift not only to assemble and present a staggering amount of information, but also to synthesize it and to think in broad, original concepts. It was Gertrude Rachel Levy who first observed that the shape of the prehistoric temples of Malta formed the outline of a woman's body. The final figure is Vincent Scully, author of The Earth, the Temple, and the Gods. Recently retired, Scully was a revered professor of architectural history at Yale University. When he turned his attention to the Greek temples and the earlier palaces of Crete, he did so with an eye for the truth of the landscape and a passion for the sacred forms alive in the beauty of the earth. I'm gonna drink some chai. Okay, let's continue. Introduction: The Spiraling Journey of Images. The end of the 20th century has witnessed something truly remarkable: the reemergence of a religion seemingly dead for so many years. The world had all but forgotten it ever existed. This religion is the worship of a great goddess who can carry many names and images, but who always represents the deity as a female presence, life-giving, nurturing, sometimes terrifying, but always tied to nature and to the truth of our own bodies, not just women's bodies. Men, too, have discovered spiritual reality in the image of a living, all-embracing goddess who creates the world and all life out of her body, not just once in the long ago, but continually in the unfolding presences of existence. In part, this religion sprang into life again through the discoveries of archaeology. As excavations revealed more and more of the human past, they also revealed a great abundance of female images, engravings on the walls of caves, vulva symbols marked on tombs as if to promise rebirth out of the divine body, frescoes of goddesses fanned by worshippers in a garden of paradise, statues of fierce, bare-breasted women holding snakes, 30,000-year-old figurines of women with huge breasts and hips, goddesses giving birth while sitting serenely on thrones flanked by lions, temples shaped like an idealized outline of a woman. When these images were joined to existent knowledge of goddesses in India, ancient Egypt, pre-conquest Mexico, Africa, and elsewhere, people understood, as if in a flash of sacred insight, that all over the world humanity once worshipped the deity in the form of a woman, and continued to do so for thousands, even tens of thousands of years. To discover that something once existed allows it to exist again. If humanity worshipped goddesses in the past, why not now? And how would such worship differ from the religion of an all-male Godhead detached from the world? Some people began to write books synthesizing all that information revealed by archaeology. Others sculpted new statues or built temples or traveled to caves or ruins to revive ancient rituals. Still, others formed circles of worshippers in their communities to celebrate the seasons and the special moments of their lives. Out of all this, something new and wholly modern has emerged, blending knowledge of the past with understanding of who we are now. At its best, this something does not just substitute goddess for God. Instead, it explores the possibilities of religion based on the body. For while a god must create the world out of pure thought, a goddess will do so in the way that women have always done, through giving birth out of her abundant womb. This simple fact allows a religion to emerge that accepts nature and our own bodies as they really are, not as enemies or prisoners of the soul or temptations of evil, but as miraculous creations with all their strengths and weaknesses. People sometimes criticize contemporary goddess worshippers for mingling research and fantasy, archaeology and wish fulfillment. It seems to me that such criticism misses the point. The modern goddess religion is not trying to recreate conditions exactly as they were in the Stone Age or in ancient Crete or any other time or place. Instead, we seek to learn from those people as we allow the goddess to come alive in a way that matches our own experience. For me, the homemade quality of modern goddess worship, especially the rituals, has always been one of its attractions. In Carol P. I'm adding the P, but it's not written in the book. In Carol P. Christ's book, The Laughter of Aphrodite, she describes a ritual she and Alexis Masters did in honor of Aphrodite on the island of Lesbos, home of Aphrodite's great poet, Sappho. As they made their way to the temple, they chose the objects and clothes they would use for the ritual As they made their way to the temple, they chose the objects and clothes they would use for the ritual from things they encountered in shops and along the paths. A postcard of a woman weaving, a bottle opener of the god Priapus with a giant erection, and a white dress with golden threads. At that moment, the two women realized they must dress in white and gold to ask the goddess for initiation into her mysteries. They then went on to a grocery for red wine, golden retsina, golden cookies, milk and honey, and yogurt, all foods which symbolize the goddess's body. By using objects they have found and aspects of our daily lives, By using objects we have found and aspects of our daily lives, we allow our religious instinct to join with our immediate reality. When Maria Fernandez and I went to Eleusis to celebrate the first day of the mysteries, for 2,000 years, the primary religious event of the ancient world, we consulted various books on what the Greeks and Romans brought, but we also brought food, stones found along the way, wild flowers, and objects from our personal belongings. In this way, Eleusis, this place so charged with history, became real to us in our lives. In writing this book, I have drawn upon scholarship, art, speculations, and my personal experiences of the sacred, both at recognized sites and in other places, including the woods beside my house. I have done my best in the writing to keep a distinction between all these sources, especially between historical information and my own ideas. Nevertheless, all these strands weave together in the telling, just as it seems to me they do in the goddess religion itself. Originally, I conceived of this book as a series of journeys to sacred places. I would visit the Greek temples and the prehistoric caves in France and describe the places and their significance. As I began to research the background and archaeology of these places, the book came alive in a different way. The world of the goddess became a world of knowledge and ideas, of history and art, a world of images shining before us with all their meanings and mystery. In my journey through this world, the physical travels remained important, for there are things we can discover with our own eyes that we will never find in research. But at the same time, the collective knowledge and speculations of all those who have gone before us can open us to unexpected wonders. And simple thinking becomes vital as well. Religious awareness grows as we ponder the meaning of an image or the connections between religious belief and daily life, or what it can mean for people to base their understanding of sacred truth on the direct reality of bodies. No book on the sacred can possibly cover every aspect of how we approach this experience. This becomes especially true in a book based in part on personal journey. At the start of this work, I decided to focus primarily on the places I would actually visit. Because I was living in Europe at the time, the book draws heavily on the ancient traditions of European goddesses, and to a lesser extent North American goddesses, leaving out such important sources as India, China, Japan, Central and South America, and the many traditions of Africa and the African diaspora. While I have gleaned knowledge and ideas and ways of looking from my readings in other traditions, and have cited them wherever it seemed correct, I have kept primarily to my decision to balance the research with the journeys. This focus on direct experience has meant that I have not attempted to discuss every goddess within the European tradition. The chapters on Greece say little about Athena, for instance, and less about Hera. I have trusted my intuition to lead me to those goddesses who spoke most about the body. The book itself is a journey traveling from the Stone Age to contemporary science. But even though it moves through time, it is not a linear journey. Instead, I would describe it as a spiral, constantly turning back on itself to look at previously seen images in a fresh way. In his great work, The Earth, the Temple, and the Gods, Professor Vincent Scully detailed the procession of the initiates who traveled from Athens to Eleusis to celebrate the greater mysteries of the goddesses Demeter and Persephone. Scully describes how landscape images of the goddess's power, a cone-shaped mountain, a double-cleft peak, would appear, disappear, and reappear again at different stages of the journey. In much the same way, different images, themes, ideas, even characters appear in this book, tell us their messages, then vanish, only to reappear later in more detail or in another context. The goddess religion itself is not linear, but neither is it simply a circle, not in the sense of something static that repeats itself over and over without change. Its cycles are those of a spiral procession, moving away and back again. For tens of thousands of years, the creative power of the divine female body dominated spiritual awareness. With the rise of warrior gods and transcendent religion detached from nature and bodies, the goddess seemed to vanish. In many places, not even a memory remained. And yet, she has suddenly returned to us at this most unlikely of times. Though part of this return involves those discoveries of archaeology and the decoding of ancient texts and images, she is not the same as the goddess of thousands of years ago. A religion based on the divine body is a religion of change, of that spiral movement turning and opening into new experience. Like an individual body, the earth itself changes, not only cyclically with the seasons, but also more permanently over long periods of time as mountains erupt or erode, glaciers rise and fall, and even the atmosphere alters its chemical composition. I'm going to have some chai. Though the book allows the goddess from the Stone Age to though the book follows the goddess from the Stone Age to modern science, it begins with a preparation for the journey. The first two chapters form a meditation on the very concept of the goddess's body. They examine what it means to us to exist as bodies, and to allow our awareness of the sacred to emerge from the joining of nature and imagination. These two chapters move through the entire world of images and ideas surrounding the divine body. The journey begins properly with Chapter 3 as we descend into the caves of the Old Stone Age in Europe. There we encounter the great paintings of 20,000 years ago, as well as the many carvings of the female body. Some with mountainous breasts and hips, some faceless or entirely without heads, even some with long phallic necks, leading us to ponder the mingling of male and female in the divine body. Chapters 4 and 5 look at the new Stone Age and the great changes that came with the development of agriculture. Chapter 4 moves along the stone circles, giant passage mounds, and other monuments that remain so mysteriously across the European landscape and elsewhere. Chapter 5 examines the cultural patterns of those times, especially the evidence of societies that lived for thousands of years without violence. The chapter ends with the question of how and why the civilization of the goddess became lost, not just in Europe and the Middle East, but in places as isolated from each other as Japan and Tierra del Fuego. Chapter 6 takes us to Crete, where the European goddess religion opened to its last and greatest flowering. We learn to look deeply at the body forms alive within the landscape. From Minoan Crete, we move to the later culture of the Greeks, where the archaic goddesses managed to survive and take on new meanings despite their transformation into the lesser figures of classical mythology. In Chapter 7, we meet the full power of that survival as we journey into the Eleusinian mysteries. I have tried to look deeply into these rites, seeking the goddess Persephone, whose name means she who shines in the dark. As she gleams brightly in the dark fears and wonder of our own lives. After I had written the first draft of this book, I was reading it through to revise it. I discovered a main character emerging, like the heroine of a novel. This character is Persephone, who darts forward again and again in the early chapters, showing herself and then retreating once more until the proper time for her full appearance. In the myth, the unnamed goddess appears first as an innocent core spelled with a K. Maiden or daughter is what it means. Gathering flowers when death roars out of the ground to drag her down into the underworld. Rather than accept what the gods describe as irreversible, even proper, Persephone's mother, Demeter, the grain goddess, stops old plant life from growing until Zeus agrees to order death to allow Persephone to return. But Persephone does not come back the same as before. Instead, she has found her true power as the queen of the dead, going back underground for part of every year to shine in the darkness. The more we ponder this story, the more we discover so many of our own issues. The cycles of the year, our own fear of death, separation and reconciliation with our mothers, struggle against the brutality of rape and incest, the courage to face institutionalized authority, and even wider issues. The myth symbolizes that very return of the goddess religion from the seeming death of 5,000 years of rule by a transcendent God separated from the world. Finally, we can discover in this tale of the mother and daughter separated by an intruding male the coded origin of sexuality and death. The discovery of biological realities in the story of Persephone leads to the final chapter and the Gaia theory of contemporary science. In this idea of the earth as a single living organism, we discover that the spiral has truly turned round and opened, bringing back the prehistoric goddess in a new and vital way. Both the Eleusinian mysteries and the Gaia theory address our very deep sense of the world as composed of isolated fragments, each one seemingly alone, and yet all of them, all of us, connected at some fundamental level. Excuse me. Modern biology returns us to the same idea as that represented by the goddess Persephone rising from the land of the dead, that we are all alive, all joined with each other, with the animals and the plants, with the stars and the dust, together in the body of the goddess. So that's the introduction. I will pause there and we will pick up the next episode with the first chapter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for receiving.